All right, the clock is absolutely ticking in the Persian Gulf. The United States has just dropped a major ultimatum on Iran, and it's created this incredibly dangerous standoff right in the Strait of Hormuz. So today, we're going to unpack this high-stakes game of chicken and see what happens when diplomacy comes with a threat of total annihilation.
And yeah, there is zero mistaking the tone here. The message coming from the White House is about as blunt as it gets. Make a deal, or we're ready to blow you to smithereens. This isn't just some tough talk. This is a declaration that is pushing this whole conflict right to the edge. The stakes, they honestly could not be higher.
So, how do we get to this breaking point? Well, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the White House's deal or destroy strategy. Then we'll dive into the military plan, which has a pretty intense name, Operation Epic Fury. After that, we'll try to untangle the mess of secret negotiations, check out the political battle happening back home, and finally, get to the one thing, the ultimate prize that this entire conflict is really about.
Okay, so the American approach here is, well, it's a study in contradictions. On one hand, you've got these incredibly aggressive public threats. But then, at the exact same time, they're claiming that quiet diplomatic talks are actually going great. So, which is it?
And this really gets to the heart of that dual strategy. Just look at the contrast. On one side, you have threats to obliterate Iran's core infrastructure. We're talking power plants, oil wells. And on the other, you have these quiet assurances that talks are going well. It's that classic carrot and stick approach, but, played out on a global stage where the consequences could be absolutely explosive.
Now let's talk about the stick side of that equation. Because the military option isn't just a threat. It's a full-blown plan with a name, Operation Epic Fury. And the pieces are already moving.
And that threat is being backed up with some serious force. We're talking 3,500 sailors and Marines from a very versatile expeditionary unit who have just shown up in the Arabian Sea. This is not just for show. This is a real, tangible military buildup designed to put maximum pressure on Iran.
And the goals of this operation? They are huge. This isn't just about keeping Iran in check. The Pentagon is aiming to systematically dismantle Iran's entire offensive capability. We're talking about destroying their navy, their ballistic missiles, taking out their factories for missiles and drones, and weakening their allies or proxies all across the region. And it's all driven by that one ultimate goal, making sure Iran never, ever gets a nuclear weapon.
Now get this. This isn't some plan for way off in the future. The Pentagon's own timeline for Operation Epic Fury is just 4 to 6 weeks. And as of right now, we are 30 days in. So the clock is ticking, not just on the diplomatic front, but on the military one too.
So while all that military pressure is building up, what about the diplomatic carrot? Well, this is where the story gets really, really murky. Because depending on who you ask, the talks are either going great or they're not even happening at all.
I mean, this just captures the disconnect perfectly, right? The White House is out here saying we're doing extremely well in negotiations. But then a top Iranian official comes out and basically accuses the U.S. of making stuff up, calling it a big mistake to pass off their wishes as actual news. So what is really going on?
And that brings up the most important question of all. If talks are happening, who is the U.S. actually talking to? And this, right here, is where the whole diplomatic effort gets incredibly complicated.
And check this out. This is a pretty stunning admission from the White House itself. They say they're in a testing phase to figure out who even has the legitimacy to make a deal. And why? Because, in their own words, a lot of the previous leadership has been killed. It's kind of hard to make a deal when you're not even sure who's in charge anymore.
So as you can imagine, all this confusion and high-stakes maneuvering is fueling a massive debate back in the United States. The whole strategy has created this deep political split, with people looking at the exact same events and seeing two completely different things.
On one side of the argument, the criticism is absolutely scathing. Critics see this whole thing not as a success, but as a historic failure in the making, what they're calling one of the greatest presidential blunders of our time, one that's pushed the U.S. into a really dangerous corner.
But then, supporters of the administration see it completely differently. They argue that the critics are just playing politics, while the president is actually acting on real conviction. Their argument is that he's willing to do what he thinks is right, even if it's not popular, unlike, typical politicians.
So the critics are pointing to what they see as some major inconsistencies. They're asking, for instance, if the war is already won, like has been claimed, then why are we sending thousands more troops? They also point to goals that seem to be constantly changing and even question if Iran is somehow benefiting from all this. These are the kinds of tough questions fueling all the skepticism.
But the supporters, they push back, and they push back hard. They argue that the critics are just blinded by politics and are ignoring the real progress that's been made in weakening Iran's military. And all that confusion we were talking about, they see that as a feature, not a bug, a deliberate strategy to keep the enemy off balance, like a really complicated game of chess.
So, with all this noise, you've got the threats, the politics, the military movements. What does this conflict really boil down to? When you strip everything else away, it all comes down to one single critical prize.
You know, one intelligence analyst really cut through all the noise and put it perfectly. The headlines, the rhetoric, the troops, all of it, he says, revolves around one thing: Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium. That is the ultimate prize, and, for many, the ultimate fear. So what is this stuff? Well, to put it simply, enriched uranium is the critical fuel you need for nuclear weapons. It is incredibly hard to make, and Iran is believed to have a stockpile of nearly 1,000 pounds, all buried deep inside fortified facilities. That stockpile, that's the red line.
So the billion-dollar question is, how do you get that material out of there? Well, one wild, high-risk option being talked about is this unprecedented ground operation. It would involve a special task force going in, using some kind of advanced, non-lethal discombobulator to neutralize guards, digging through tunnels, and then physically airlifting 1,000 pounds of uranium out. I mean, it is a mission straight out of a Hollywood movie, and it's something that's never been tried in combat before.
And this really gets to the core problem for military planners. You can bomb a facility, but you can't just bomb away the nuclear material itself. Not when it's buried deep underground. So getting the uranium might require boots on the ground, and that risks kicking off a massive all-out war.
And that very dilemma is why you're hearing commentators say things like this. With the deadline getting closer and the military in position, we are very likely heading into the most critical and potentially dangerous phase of this entire conflict.
Which leaves us right here, with this one massive question. The U.S. is pushing for a deal, while it's also preparing for destruction. Iran is not backing